Good morning, Moray Rabotai, Bruchim Habayim. We're continuing on Masechet Succah. We're on Daf Vav, Amud Aleph, 8 lines down from the top of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, the girl in our community that should, Be'ezrat Hashem, have a full recovery, Refuah Shelema. Amen. Also for Refuah Shelema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid that should have full recovery. Amen. This month's learnings of the community have been dedicated by the Shea family, Dayan family, Cohen families. Should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Okay, so a quick recap, synopsis of what we did before is, we mentioned that according to Rabbi Meir, we know why the minimum shiur of Sukkah is 10 tfachim, because we learned it from the Kruvim, who were porsek nafayim sochechim al haaron, the language of Sukkah on top of the kaporet, and that we know is, according to Rabbi Meir, exactly above 10 tfachim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, however, the Gemara said, it's going to be 11 and a half, because Rabbi Yehuda's tfachim are much less, so the 10 tfachim, it's not really 10, it's going to end up with 8 and a half tfachim, the aron and the kaporet, and you are left 20 minus 8 and a half with 11 and a half tfachim, so that you don't know. We have zero source from the Torah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Sukkah, the minimum mechitzah of Sukkah has to be 10 tfachim. So how do we know it? The Gemara said, well, it's halacha Moshe Misinai. And now we are amidst asking a question on that. Say, well, it's halacha Moshe Misinai. We have a braita that says it. Darshaning from a pasuk, explaining a pasuk and deducing from it all of the shiurim, chatzitzin, umechitzin, so to speak, of the Torah. So says the Gemara, when we have a pasuk praising Eretz Yisrael with the 7 species of Eretz, Chita, Ora, Vegefen, Ut'ena, Verimon, Eretz, Shemen, Udvash, those are the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael, but each one of them really is coming to tell you a shiur, a specific measurement of halacha. It's not just as telling you the 7 species that are amazing. It's coming to actually tell you, teach us 7 different measurements, halachic measurements in the Torah. We discussed the first 5 yesterday, and we are beginning with the 6th this morning. If you take a look, 9 lines down really, starting Zet Shemen Udvash. The Zet Shemen, which is Zetim, olives, the Gemara says, Eres Shekol Shiureha Kezetim. Eretz Yisrael is a land that all of its measurements are kazayit. Gemara says, wait a second, all of its measurements are kazayit. We just ended saying 5 different measurements up to now. So how do you say all of its measurements are kazayit? Of course it's not all. Kol shiurei asal kadatachi, things, all of its shiurim can't be. Ha'ika hanida amrinan, we just got finished saying a bunch that's not kazayit. Ela ema, says the Gemara, rov shiurei hakezetim, the majority of its measurements are kazayit. What, like what? If you take a look at Rashi, the end of the first wide line in Rashi, 5 lines down from the wide lines. Rov shiura kezetim, met venevelam. Met means a kazayit of a corpse has the halachot of an actual corpse. We mentioned before, yesterday, that if you have a small bone from a corpse, as long as it is a shiur of a seora, of a barley, it is metameh b'magau masa. It has the tumat mit in regards to touching it or carrying it, right? How about ohel? We said it's not metameh be'ohel, the Gemara said, right? In other words, if you come into a building that has a little bone of a dead person, and this actually could be very much applicable when you go to medical school and you're a kohen and you have to deal with different areas of body anatomy and so on. Sometimes you could have like a skull of a dead person, actual skull, is not the whole body, but it's the skull, right? So that's a bigger bone than a seorah. It's metameh, even be'ohel, right? It has, without getting into the details of the halacha. But what is the minimum that would be metameh b'maga u'masa u'be'ohel? You have a piece of flesh of a dead person, right? When do you have that? Unfortunately, this became a very big question for those who are Kohanim who work with Zakah in Eretz Yisrael in the past 13, 14 months. It has become a bigger question. You have to know, because sometimes, Chas v'Shalom, you can have pieces of flesh. And the answer is kazait. Kazait from a dead body has all of its, the Rambam explains, the reason it's kazait because beriyato ke kazait. When you have a full embryo, the smallest size of a full embryo when it actually forms in the womb is kazayit. It's very, very small. So therefore, kazayit from the met always carries the halachot of a full corpse in regards to the halachot of tumah v'tahara. Fine. Says the Rashi, v'nevela. Nevela means a dead animal. Dead animal also has tumat maga umasa, and that also is with kazayit, carrying or touching a piece of nevela which is kazayit would be asur. Ve'isur chelev v'dam, or eating things that are prohibited, like chelev, prohibited fats. The actual isur karet is not just if you have a little tiny bit, but it is when a person has a kazayit of chelev. Same is with dam, even though that usually dam is liquid, but dam that's nikrash, it will be a isur of kazayit. Now, without getting into too many details of shiur kazayit, for instance, I'll just put a parenthesis here. The Chafetz Chaim writes in Orach Chaim Siman Kuf Ein Dalet in Biur Halacha. He's dealing there with drinking the kos shel kiddush and making sure that you are yotze with bracha achrona of Birkat Hamazon, right? This we recently discussed in later on in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Resh Ayin Gimel, almost 100 simanim later. Chafetz Chaim says, well, it's machloket rishonim. So he says, well, don't do a full revi'it of wine when you say kiddush. Well, Shulchan Aruch disagrees with this. Ben Ishchai, Chachomad, you say you could do a full revi'it, no problem, because Amazon covers it. But Chafetz Chaim says, just do melo lugmav, the minimum amount that's needed is rov revi'it, majority of revi'it, and you're good to go. But then he says, oh no, you're still not good to go, because many Rishonim hold that having a kazayit of drinks also is mechayev bracha acharona. So you're however you slice this, you're still on a hook for having kavanah in Birkat Hamazon, beferush, that the Birkat Hamazon that I say should cover also the wine of kiddush that I drank before I said hamotzi. So that's how Chafetz Chaim comes out. But so you have a concept of kazayit by drinks as well, but here you don't necessarily need to come to that. Further in Rashi, you see the isur that he says by pigul, notar, all of the korbanot that were either not properly done or they were properly done, but now the time frame has expired and it became notar, tameh, gidanashe, all of those are shiurei kazayit. So many examples of kazayit, says the Gemara. Rov shiureha, the majority of the measurements that we deal with on daily basis are kazayit. Fine, that's understandable. We could deal with that. Says the Gemara, dvash. What is dvash? Dvash is not honey, but it is, of course, a reference to the dates. So says the Gemara, kakotevet kasa b'yom kippurim. We have the shiur of kotevet kasa on Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur, for a person to be chayav karet, chas v'shalom, for eating, will be a shiur of not kazayit, but kotevet kasa, a large date. Right? Now, this is, of course, we're talking in mikar adin in volume, not in weight. And volume of different things could be different, but we're talking about, and Shulchan Aruch says, it doesn't make a difference if it's nanas or og melech habashan. It doesn't make a difference if you get og melech habashan or you get like a little shorty guy. It all is going to be the same shiur of kotevet gasa because it is learned from, really, truthfully, is Halacha Moshe Sinai, as we'll see in just a second. But the Gemara over here is saying, it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Eres Chita is for shiurim, Seorah for shiurim, Gefen, Tenarim. All of them are mentioned for a drasha of shiurim. So therefore, coming to full circle of the question of the Gemara, how do you say that this is all Halacha Moshe Sinai? When you darshan something from the psukim, it's no longer Halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a drasha from the Torah and makes the halacha that you deduce from it a deoraita, a full-fledged biblical concept. So says the Gemara, Alma, deoraita ninu. You see from here that we're darshaning it from psukim, hence it is deoraita, not halacha Moshe Sinai. The Gemara says, really? You gotta go there? It's not at all the simple understanding of the Gemara. This is what we call normally asmachta ba'alma. There are conceptual things that we have, and the Torah, of course, hints to it. You know, the Maharal, in important parentheses we should mention, Maharal of Prague, in the beginning of his fantastic sefer, Be'er HaGolah, in which he explains 7 different be'erot of questions that people have on Torah and Chachamim, and it's probably one of the most fundamental works of the Maharal, and everything he wrote are fundamental, but this is probably one of the best of the best. In the very beginning, the Maharal writes a question of people having issues with the Rabbanans. How did Chachamim add to the Torah? So it says, don't add, don't subtract from the Torah. And he divides the Rabbanans to 4 different elements. And he actually says, whenever Chazal say asmachta be'alma, and he gives several examples from the Gemarot, it doesn't mean that they went and they found something that seems similar and they just hang their hat on it. It doesn't mean that, but it means the Torah actually is hinting to you those concepts. So it doesn't happen to be, what are the odds that all of these shiurei Torah are encapsulated, right, in one pasuk that talks about these 7 species? 0. The Torah is actually hinting to it, but it's not a drasha. It's not at all the simple understanding of the Chumash. Hence, says the Gemara, the Tispra really does it make sense? Shiurim mikativi, is the pasuk at all talking about shiurim? The pasuk is simply praising Eretz Yisrael. It's not at all talking about anything close to the concept of shiurim even. For you to say that this is a drasha, so therefore it's not a drasha gemura. It's not at all explanation of the pasuk. V'keras machta ba'almahu. Really, ela hilchetaninu. These are all halacha Moshe Sinai, and the pasuk that we found is a hint to those items, is a asmachta ba'alma, is just a asmachta. Fine. So this is the first of the 3 things that we mentioned. Remember, the Gemara started saying, shiurin, chatzitzin, umechitzin, they're halacha Moshe Sinai, right? 3 items. One is shiurin, the measurement, which we just discussed right now. Then it's chatzitza, the concept of having a barrier between you and the water of the mikveh when you need dunking in the mikveh for a person, for a vessel. And then mechitzas, which we used for the mechitza of sukkah. So we still have 1 down, 2 more to go. Says the Gemara, chatzitzin deoraita ninu. Same question. The Gemara says, chatzitza is halacha Moshe Sinai. Chatzitza is deoraita. Not only it's not a drasha, it actually says it in the Chumash that you can't have chatzitza. How so? The Gemara says, dichtiv, when the Torah talks about a man going to mikveh, it says, Verachas et besaro b'mayim. Now, many times in Chumash it says, Verachas b'mayim v'ithar. Right? It just says, wash in a mikveh and you'll be good. But here, explaining that process, it says 2 extra words. Verachas et besaro b'mayim. So says the Gemara, why do you need besaro? Just say Verachas b'mayim, wash in water. What are you washing? Your spirit? Of course you're washing your body, right? So why do you have to tell me Ve'achas et besaro b'mayim? The Gemara says, שלא יהיה דבר חוצץ בינו לבין המים. It means your flesh has to be touching the water. Nothing in between them. Which means you can't have chatzitza. So that's in the pasuk itself. Like, there is no other way to learn this pasuk. It is explicitly telling you that you cannot have any chatzitzas. So it's the oraita, like 101, like mamash the oraita, right? The Gemara says, yes, you're correct. We agree with that. We could agree with that. That's not what we're talking about when we say it's halacha b'shem Sinai. Not the concept of chatzitza. You're correct. Concept of chatzitza is mentioned in the Torah itself. Nothing to talk about. Ki atai hilchetam, when the halacha b'shem Sinai is needed, is lesaro. It's for your hair. In other words, your basar, quote unquote, is mentioned in the Chumash, right? But last I checked, your sar is not really basar, right? So you have this beautiful long hair, or peot, or beard, right? Can that be sticking out of the water a little bit, or have a bandage? You can have a bandage on the hair, but can have a wrap around it, so to speak? Or do you have a concept of chasisa by hair also? And says the Gemara, you absolutely do, and that's halacha Moshe Sinai. Gemara says, seriously? That's not halacha Moshe Sinai either. That is written in the Chumash as well. Where do you find sa'ar in the Chumash? Very simple. Says the Gemara, Uchta Rabba bar Chana. Let's go through this. The Amar Rabba bar Chana said, Nima achat kshura chotzeset. Rabba bar Chana says we have halachot in regards to the hair being a chatzitza. If you have one hair, that is tied to itself, that means you have a hair and you tie it to itself, like some people do the bottom of the tzitziot. That, says Rabbi Chana, is considered chatzitza if the person cares about it. If you really don't want it, you're sitting there trying to unknot this one knot, because even one hair being knotted bothers you, it's a chatzitza. If you have three strands of hair together, and you knotted them all together, one knot, 3 se'arot thick, so to speak, that is not chatzitza. Because one hair, when you tie it to itself, it becomes very tight. And the water, no way, is going to get through to it. But then you have 3 already, it's thick enough that the combination does not let it become tight enough. The water does not get in, and therefore it's not considered chatzitza. The water is going to get into it. Says the Gemara, Nima achat kshura chotzetzet. 1 is going to be chatzitza. 3, eno chotzetzet. It's not going to be chatzitza. 2, en yodea. 2, I don't know. I know 1 is a problem. I know 3 is already not a problem. 2 is already kind of like boring. I don't know what it is, right? This is Rabbi bar Chana's halacha. So it says the Gemara, how do you, by the way, know that it is a chatzitza? So the Gemara says that is halacha Moshe Sinai. The Gemara says, wait a second, that's not a chatzitza. Halacha Moshe Sinai. That's also in the Torah. Sa'ar na mideoraitahu. I know sa'ar is also mideoraita. It's not a halacha Moshe Sinai. How do I know? The pasuk says, our own good old pasuk, verachas et besaro. Now, a minute ago we said besaro is written clearly. It means you can't have any. But what's the et? Just say verachas besaro veithar. Why do you have to say et? Now, all of the people around this table know, right, that et is always l'rabot. Shimon HaMsuni would darshin all the etim shebatorah, that any time that says et is coming to tell you not only it itself, but something that's adjacent to it, addition to that as well. Now, what is et adding to the besaro? What is you that's not your flesh in the outer body is hair. Et is rabot, the hair. So not only you have to have your flesh cleared and no barriers between your body, your flesh, your basar, and the water, but the Torah itself, with the word et, is telling you that you cannot have any barriers between your hair and the water either.
Why not nails?
That is part of the body.
You could say the hair is part of your body too.
No, it's not. right? Now the question is if the nails are considered like hair or not, without getting into the details of the whole chatzitza, but nevertheless, this is the hair. It is considered its own entity, and now we'll see really how Rashi understands this in real halachot of chatzitza. Hair takes a life of its own, which if you have, well, let's actually see it in Rashi itself. We'll see that the hair actually becomes an identity of its own when talking about the halachot of chatzitza in Tevilat Adam. Says the Gemara, so Rachas et besaro, et is coming to teach you all of that which is not your basar, but it is considered et besaro, something additional, which is hair, says the Gemara. Et besaro is et hatafel besaro, right? So says the Gemara. By the way, the Midrash says that Adam Arishon, all of his body was like nails. But then afterwards, it was diminished to only the ends of the body, which is the 20 toes that a person has. So that really is considered part of the basar. It was what it was before, but hair is its own. It's very much its own thing. So says the Gemara, Umaynin husaro. That et is teaching you this, but that means it's in the Doraita. It's in the Torah itself. The Gemara says, you're correct. I agree with that too. Ki atai ilcheta. So halacha Moshe Mishnah is what? Licht Rabbi Yitzchak. It's coming to teach you the halacha of Rabbi Yitzchak. What is the halacha of Rabbi Yitzchak? Says the Gemara, Damar Rabbi Yitzchak. Devar Torah midoraita rubo makbid alav chotzes. The halachot of chatzitza has to do with two elements from the Torah. Biblically speaking, it's only chatzitza when it is covering an important part of the body, like the majority of the body. If it's a majority of your body and you really don't want that thing to be there, then it's chotzes. Then it's considered a chatzitza. But if it's not the majority of your body, you just have a Band-Aid on, you just have a little cast on, that is not the majority of the body. So even if you really don't want it to be there, you really care for it not to be there, still it's not midoraita. Or if you have something that's small, right, rubo makpid is a problem. Majority, and you don't want it to be there. So if it's rubo, but it's not, you're not makpid. If the majority of your body is bandaged, but you really don't care about it, or majority of your body has a certain, let's say, tit. People go to take, the mud bath. So you have this mud on the majority of your body, but you're not makpid. You really want it to be there because it's you. Think that it has a healing element, all right? All the heebie-jeebie things. So you're not makpid, you want it to be there. Midoraita, that's not makpid, right? That's not chotzes. So if you have two negatives, it's covering rov of your body and you're makpid, you don't want it to be there, that's the only doraita. If you only have one negative, one box checked, so to speak, it's majority, but you don't care about it. Or it's minority of your body, but you really don't want it to be there, those are all Midrabana is gezerah, right? V'sheino makpid alav eno chotzes. V'gazru al rubo sheino makpid. Chazal enacted a isur de Rabbanan that if you have majority of your body, but you don't care about it, like the case of the mud that we mentioned, or you have minority of the body, miuto hamakpid, that you do care, you don't want it to be there. Like the cast example that we gave. You really don't want the cast to be there, but it's the minority of your body. That's how we would understand, right? Rashi says no. Majority and minority is talking about your hair. Majority of your hair has, mud on it. Minority of your hair has mud on it. So a majority and you are makpid is doraita, says Rashi. Minority and you're makpid, or majority and you're not makpid, is going to be only midrabanan, right? And Chazal enacted these two elements, these two scenarios that's going to be a problem, because if you don't make that a problem, people are going to go to mikveh, and sometimes you're going to end up with majority of your hair being dirty and covered with mud or whatnot, and you're not going to necessarily care about it. You're going to come to transgress a deoraita, says the Gemara. Once you're on a row, says the Gemara, and you're making all these darabanans for checking only one box, so you should just also say any chatzisa is a problem, even if it's miuto she'eno makbid. Why not? Why wouldn't you just say any chatzisa, even if you have a little band-aid on your hand and you don't really care about it, but it's a chatzisa after all? Why didn't you make that asur? Because it seems like right now, that if you have, and this actually becomes very much a relevant halacha in Chod Tlat Yadayim, if you have a band-aid on your hand, right? And you want to do the Tlat Yadayim, do you have to take it off? You don't have to take it off. Right? This becomes relevant. Well, says, why don't you just prohibit everything, right? Even if you have one hair that's tied, knotted to itself, even if you don't care about it, should be asur. Now says, of course, we're not going to do that. You know why? Because why don't you make a gezerah on that? Mara says simple, because he gufa gezerah. Because checking one box only itself is the Rabbanan. It's a gezerah. By itself, midoraita would not be a problem. The reason it's a problem is because if you don't make that stringency midrabanan, we're worried that's going to come to a doraita. But now that's the Rabbanan, this by itself is a gezerah. You're going to make another gezerah to this gezerah. We're worried for this because we're worried for this that's going to maybe come to this. That's already too far-fetched. It's of course a general rule that ein gozrin gezerah le gezerah. We only do a gezerah for a doraita. But the gezerah is the Rabbanah. We don't do another gezerah for the gezerah. In a general sense, the Tosafot say that sometimes we do because is important. There are exceptions to this rule, but this is almost a blanket rule all over Shas. It has exceptions, and then aside from the exceptions, sometimes is kula chada gezerah, that sometimes Chazal enacted multiple layers and steps of the gezerah to begin with. It's not a gezerah, it's just they blanket answer the entire thing, even though that there are few steps into it. So there are exceptions, but as a general rule, we don't make a gezerah. Let's just finish this before our time is up. Says the Gemara, that is the halacha Moshe Misinai. So midoraita, you would have this, but this is when we talk about halacha Moshe Misinai, we're talking about this element. Fine. So 2 down, 1 to go. Mechitzin hadamaran. The Gemara says the mechitza that we mentioned with halacha Moshe Misinai is exactly what we spoke about. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we don't have a source from the Torah that the minimum wall of Sukkah should be 10 tfachim. Where do you know it from? Halacha Moshe Misinai. And that's exactly what it means. Mechitza is halacha Moshe Misinai. The Gemara says, Chazak Baruch. That only works according to, now it reverses the problem. You told me that we have a source in the Torah according to Rabbi Meir. Only according to Rabbi Yehuda we need halacha Moshe Misinai. Chazak Baruch. I agree with you that according to Rabbi Yehuda we need halacha Moshe Misinai. How about Rabbi Meir? This is a blanket statement that shiurin chatzitzin umechitzin halacha Moshe Misinai. Everybody agrees with that. So there has to be an element of halacha Moshe Misinai, even according to Rabbi Meir. Sukkah is not one. We don't need this for Sukkah. And the Gemara says, probably one of the most important items that already partially came up before in Daf Hey, and the Gemara says it again, Ki hatai hilcheta, the halacha Moshe Misinai in regards to the mechitza of Sukkah is needed for 3 items. Says the Gemara, legud velavud vedufan akuma. We have imaginary halachic walls that are not real walls, and yet the halacha considers them considers them mechitza, a wall, and that is halacha Moshe Messiah. 3 items. What are the 3 items? A, if you have poles less than 3 tfachim away from each other, right? One pole, another pole, or strings even, tight strings that can't be moved, right? But they're within 3 tfachim of each other, that is considered a wall. Even though that you see everything, it's like you could even pass your hand through it, it's not a wall, but halacha sees it lavut as if they're closed up as a wall. That's one. Good means good achit and good asik. As we discussed good asik already before, that when you have a mechitza, the halacha sees it going upward, and in Daf Yud Chet later on in the Gemara we're going to have good achit as well, that when you have a beam on top, sometimes it's considered coming all the way down to the ground. We spoke about that also for a moment in Daf Hey, by the poles that are on top of the rooftop or on top of the ground. So you see no mechitza. There's nothing that halacha sees it sometimes coming down or going up. That halachic imaginary wall that actually works is there. And then dofan akuma, which you assume that the wall, when you have a schach pasul, you assume that the wall is extended if you have less schach pasul than 4 amot, than 6 feet about. Then, even though that you don't have a wall here, which is the start of your sukkah, because you have a whole lot of schach pasul here, or awning, a cement awning, right? And your wall is really here, but the halacha imagines that your wall is here, because we see this as a dofan akuma. That also is a halachic imaginary wall that works, and those 3 items, says the Gemara, is halacha Moshe Sinai. So we have already, according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, a source for how we know the sukkah is minimum height of 10 tfachim requirement, and we'll B'ezrat Hashem continue the next Gemara in the days to come.